I look like trash. Hey guys, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite albums. And today I'm gonna be doing another mini albums review, or mini album reviews, however you like to call it. So yes, I have another batch of 2018 albums, and most of which are good and pretty great. So let's get it on. Originally, I wanted to review 5 albums, including friggin' Billy Woods and Kenny Segal with Hiding Places. But unfortunately, yesterday, I was already not that familiar with the album to begin with, and I wanted to listen to it even more yesterday, and Spotify stopped working apparently, and I can't find the album on YouTube, so you know what, whatever. I'll leave that album for my next mini albums review video, which will also come out in this month, which also includes Lizzo, Kevin Abstract, I think, So without further ado, let's start off with Weyes Blood with Titanic Rising, an album that I've been waiting for reviewing for a very long time. So Weyes Blood, aka Natalie Merring, had been in the game for quite a while now, and this album is a very dreamy, spacey, psychedelic, nostalgic art pop album. She makes some really experimental pop music before, but on this album it sounds way more straightforward and way more accessible, but yet the songs here, they are not necessarily punchy or anything, but yet they are very catchy, very colorful and appealing. And it's also very lavishing, exuberant, and it has a really strong 60s and 70s influence vibe. Also, I can hear influences from Kate Bush, Julia Holter, and Beach House, and also more. And I just love how soft and pillowy the instrumentals on this album are. So we start off with A Lot's Gonna Change, which is already my favorite track of the album. It's such a beautiful opening for the album. It sounds like it's gonna be a perfect opening for a Roger Moore's era James Bond movie, because it's just so nostalgic. It has this old school soul jazz vibe mixing with some very beautiful, almost glitzy, glossy chamber pop music. It's a very cinematic opening with some sad, dreary pianos and some super beautiful strings that are just swelling from beneath. It's absolutely amazing, and I love it. And then we have Andromeda, which is a straight up 70s throwback track with a very solid and dreamy guitar performance with a guitar solo, of course. And it's a really sad and elegant track with some painfully difficult lyrics about love. And it's a really beautiful track with a very haunting chorus, and I love it a lot as well. Same goes for the next track, Every Day. It gets me every day. It's a very catchy and uplifting track with some prominent saloon pianos and some jaunty guitar chords. However, the lyrics, they are way more sad and way more emotional, also talking about love. And I also really like the clappy beats and the vintage vocal harmonies throughout the entire track, plus a very grand outro. The track Something to Believe is also really, really beautiful, even though it's not as musically appealing as the first 3 tracks of the album. It has this really nice hot and cold chord progression in the verses, and the choruses are really catchy and dreamy as always, and it has a really emotional and beautiful climax as well. And then we have the title track, which is basically a very spacey interlude, which basically transitions onto the track Movies, which has some really nice, otherworldly, transcendent, sci-fi-esque sins sort of ascending into the air, and it's really intergalactic. It's really cinematic as well, which is really fitting given that the title of the song is Movies, and it has some really sad and stiff vocals with some really heavy and grand strings underneath, and again, very, very explosive ending, I have to say. Up next, we have Mirror Forever, probably my least favorite track here. It has a pretty nice tune, but instrumentally speaking, it's pretty rigid, a little bit dull, maybe even one-dimensional. And then we have Wild Time, which is maybe a little slower, a little bit more dragged on, but I actually like this song quite a bit because of how cutesy and lovely and pleasant it is. It's a really sweet, psychedelic, smooth ballad that's really otherworldly. We also get some heavy beach house vibes on this track as well, which is really nice. And then we have the track Picture Me Better, which is an incredibly nice acoustic guitar track with an incredibly angelic chorus. Even though it's not as eventful of a track, it's still very beautiful indeed. And the album closer is basically a nice little strings reprise. And overall, I really, really love this album for how beautiful and dreamy and psychedelic it is. Maybe it's not like a legendary album, but it's close. It's close. I wish she's a little more versatile, I guess. So yes, I'm giving this album a strong 8 out of 10. And then up next we have friggin' Quelle Chris with Guns. Quelle Chris had been on a streak lately. In the year 2017, he dropped Being You Is Great. I like Being Me, I think is the title of the album, and it's a pretty weird, absurd, little abstract rap album that I completely forgot to review and listen to in 2017. I'll do a 2017 Redux list, by the way. And then last year, he and his significant other, Jean Grey, dropped Everything's Fine, which is a pretty nice album. There are a couple of slow, boring tracks here and there, but still the album overall is pretty damn good with some witty, smart, eclectic lyrics. And here we are with Guns, which is an absolute quirky, blurry, obscured maybe, but definitely jazzy, smooth rap album. The overall structure of the album is a little weird, but I still love it a lot. I think I love it way more than Everything's Fine, in fact. The album starts off with Spray and Pray, which has Quelle Chris giving off a pretty lo-fi and straightforward flow. That sounds pretty boring at first, accompanied with some lazy drum beats in the back. But later on, we get some dreary, gloomy guitars that are pretty lo-fi and pretty weird, and it just gives off a really nice, lonely vibe. The title track of the album also has some lazy, stuttery hip-hop beats and some low-pitched bass, but overall a really sweet song with some cascading piano chords that are absolutely beautiful. That's a little overshadowed by the beats a little bit, so it's all going together really well, all melting into one another. And the song talks about gun violence in a very catchy and sweet manner, so it's a really nice track as well. Up next we have Mind Your Bidness, which is a really freaky and aggressive rap song with a really, really weird beat and a really weird, eccentric, whooshy, bubbly sample with some stiff synths. It has some weird lyrics, maybe one of the lines on the song is a little miswritten, but still, I really like the attitude that Quelle Chris gives off on this track. What your bitch ass want? And then up next we have It's the Law, which is a really solid track commenting on how the law is just messed up. It's a really funny song overall, and the first verse is actually pretty damn amazing. I also really like the low-pitched bass guitars on this track, which gives the track a lot of flavor. The track Wild Minks is also pretty awesome with some spacey, dreamy, laid-back hip-hop beats. The kind of hip-hop beats that any person who makes video essays would enjoy, because this is the perfect song to put in an artsy video essay, and it's also the perfect song to listen to when you're in a cafe looking outside and it's raining and it's gloomy, but you're chill they're cool. This track is pretty chill and cool. The track Box of Wheaties is pretty swanky, catchy, funny. Also has some warm and friendly guitars, even though it's not a very eventful track overall. And the track PSA Drugfest 2003 is a pretty great track too, in my opinion, even though it wouldn't appeal to everyone. I really love it because it just sounds so weird. It has a really eerie, almost spooky, almost religious hymn vibe to the instrumentals, and it's almost like an old Wu-Tang beat. It almost reminds me of Madlib's beat a little bit. And then after that, we have Sunday Mass, which is basically a spoken word interlude, which transitions onto Straight Shot, which is an amazing track. Amazing singing here. The vocal harmonies are absolutely beautiful. Quelle Chris delivered amazing verses, and they're actually really sad and painful. I really love the marchy drum beats, and the track overall is very soulful. There's a phrase that's being kept on repeated. It's a straight shot from here. It's pretty sad, not gonna lie. However, up next we have Obamacare, which has this very eerie, freaky beat, which makes up for a freaky banger, to be honest. It almost reminds me of Danny Brown, especially the track Really Dough, and it has a really funny hook as well. I really like Quelle Chris's very lazy rapping, and I really, really enjoy the descending pianos, which gives the track a lot of charisma. And then up next we have Yumi and Nobody Else featuring Jean Grey. It's a really nice, smooth, jazzy love song with some glam pianos and some really nice chopped up beats. And at the end we have Wyrm, Wyrm. My least favorite here, not the most eventful track. The instrumentals feel a little stiff, but still not that bad of a track either. I'm giving the album overall an 8 out of 10. Yes. The third album I'm going to be talking about is The Comet Is Coming, Trust in the Life Force of the Deep Mystery. And it's a jazz fusion album, and oh man, I love this album. I love this album a lot. Apparently, the main saxophone guy on this UK based trio also plays in Sons of Kemet, which had made one of the best jazz album of 2018, if not the very best. So yes, The Comet Is Coming. They are a trio that makes jazz, electronica, rock, fusion tracks, and on this album they are especially intergalactic, spacey, cosmological, and transcendent. That's why I really, really love this album. It just gives off such an interesting character. The album starts off and ends off with Because the End is Really the Beginning and The Universe Wakes Up, and they're both these very heavy, droney, almost ambient pieces that are really cinematic, especially for the opener, which is basically this very ominous, foreboding, mysterious, spiritual jazz experience. And it transitions onto the second track, Birth of Creation, which has a really weird, almost cutesy, steady saxophone line with some jazzy beat mixture fusion thing. And it does sound pretty good. However, the instrumentals feel a little stiff, a little rigid, and I think the pacing is a little slow. But still, I really like the reed notes and the ringing, glitchy synths throughout the entire track. It's just not as solid. However, the rest of the album are pretty nice. We have the track Summon the Fire, which is an absolutely fun new wave rock jazz combo. It's just so propulsive. The track just has so much thrust. It's so energetic and it's so constant. I really love these squawky saxophones, the really crispy drums, and the pulsating keys that are just there in the back. The track Blood of the Past is an epic track. It's gigantic and it has these really, really sludgy and crushing bass line that are actually performed with a saxophone. and it sounds absolutely dystopian, almost a little dark. And at the back end of the track, we get a very existential spoken word verse, and it's really epic indeed. Almost reminds me of Swans a little bit. And the track Super Zodiac is my favorite. Oh man, I love this track so much. The way the track starts off is very beautiful. It's like sunset is happening, really laid back, really chill. But then these synths and these drums just start to come up out of nowhere, and they're really flashy, really warpy. And then we get the saxophones, and they're super stuttery and almost aggressive. It's a really, really fun track, and then occasionally all the instrumentals just go together, and it's just so redeeming. Such a triumphant track. It sounds really redeeming. It's awesome. Eargasm. And then after that, it's Astral Flying, which literally sounds like you're flying when you listen to the track. It's super smooth, and it has some really nice old school synths mixing with the jazz elements of the track. It's just very beautiful and spacey. Time Wave Zero is also pretty nice. It has a really speedy, spacey, psychedelic instrumental with some fast, uncontrollable drums. However, it doesn't feel as powerful and impactful as the other tracks. Same goes for the next track, Unity, which feels a little mundane, a little stiff, and kind of stale. And even though the track is low key, and I kind of like the intimate vibe, it feels out of place. However, the album just ends off with another really drony ambient piece that's actually very heavenly, and when all the instrumentals go together, it's just really beautiful. Also, someone's outside of my room right now. That's amazing. This is awkward. Anyway, love this album a lot. 8 out of 10 as well. I just, I don't know why, but lately there aren't just that many bad albums for me to nitpick on. Anyway, the last album that I'm going to be talking about in this video is the Dispute Panorama. Spoiler alert, this album is not an 8 out of 10, but I still like it quite a bit, a slight bit. I think the album has a really strong personality, first of all, with the very intense spoken word, narrative heavy vocal performances, and these really nice straightforward rock jams that are, even though not that versatile, sometimes very emotionally impactful and potent. So yes, emo, post-rock, hardcore, alternative rock album panorama. The album starts off with Rose Quartz, which is basically an intro here that's really spacey, crystally almost, and pretty moody. Also, what word is this? Anyway, very moody, and it's not really that amazing of an opener, to be honest, but the second and third tracks here, Fulton Street 1 and 2, are pretty epic, not gonna lie. It's basically this 10-minute long hardcore emo epic with some really sad and powerful lyrics about death and grief and misery and pain. It deals with Fulton Street and the people who died on that street, basically. And at first it has some really gentle, chimey guitars and some post-rock-ish build up to an epic climax with some powerful guitars jamming and with some pretty intense sound effects as well. And part 2 of Fulton Street is just, wow, it just hits hard. It's really emotionally potent and powerful. And then up next we have Rhodonite and Grief, probably my favorite track here, because it has the very solid songwriting of Fulton Street, but it's being put and compressed into this very straightforward, almost a little jazzy track with some really sad lyrics as well, talking about grief, talking about dealing with someone who you love being lost, being out of this world. And yeah, it has a really painful refrain of lifetimes live to die, and it has some really sharp guitars as well, and I also really like the click-clacky drumsticks. They're really intense. And also, great bridge. Also some amazing horns and a very chilling ending, not gonna lie. And then we have Anxiety Panorama, which is even more tense of a track with a higher level of energy, and the guitars there are really crushing and loud and painful and agony inducing, and also some hardcore shouts on this track. And I also really like the steady guitars and drums during the choruses. They give the track more dynamic. However, that's basically it. The rest of the album just kind of trails off. We have In Northern Michigan, which is a low-key spoken word track that's not really all that eventful. The track Views from Our Bedroom Window is pretty cumbersome, pretty not dynamic, pretty stiff, pretty rigid, and the rock passage is pretty cliche, and the vocals are pretty average. The track Footsteps at the Pond has some edgy, flashy instrumentals. However, the mix is incredibly messy, and the vocal deliveries, they feel very abrupt and gargly, blah 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 blah, you know. And the second last track is There You Are, Hiding Place, and it's incredibly spacey, mellow, and it's kind of boring. Even though it has a pretty explosive climax, it still doesn't really add up to anything. And the album ends off with You Ascendant, which is 7 minutes long, and it's okay. But yeah, even though it's not bad, it's still pretty uneventful, pretty mundane. I'm sick. So yeah, I like the splashy guitars and the distant drum beats, but still not a very nice second half for the album. So overall, pretty underwhelmed by this album. I'm kind of feeling a 6 out of 10 for La Dispute's Panorama. So what are your thoughts on these 4 albums? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. It's 8:30 p.m. I have to go eat dinner.